Okay, so I think we're recording. Let me just check. Yeah. So welcome to day 2 of Passage to Bliss. Before I get started, actually, are there any questions, anything that I need to settle into before I get kicked off into the conversation for today?
No, I'm good.
Okay, nothing. So I actually feel, so we went through this graph yesterday. We went through this idea that there's this tension between the beingness and the doingness, and as a result of the tension, we land in different kind of quadrants. And each one of these quadrants represent a particular frame of mind, a particular kind of consciousness. What I just want to say is that as much as this graphic that I've created here has got 4 quadrants, I would imagine that there are as many levels of consciousness as there are seconds in the day, multiplied by human beings, because we float through one level of consciousness into the other one all the time. And I think what is just important to say is that everything that I say is a generalization. It doesn't necessarily apply 100% to an individual, but this is kind of the behaviors that you see in each one of these quadrants. And depending on what your level of consciousness is, there are going to be times where you are on all, or there are ways in your life where you can be experiencing all of them, depending on where you're at emotionally, psychologically, what is happening in your life, what is triggering you. We are not static creatures, we are dynamic creatures. And sometimes, even if you're in the flourishing space, you can still be kicked by life into a losing out space. The thing is just, you're probably going to catch yourself faster and you're going to make your way back to the flourishing space more rapidly than, if life kicks you and you are in losing space, your ability to rebound or to get to another level is hugely challenged then.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to run through so yeah, that's the tension. And we do feel like we are walking a tightrope, each and every single one of us. We aspire to really leading into our authentic self. We aspire to stepping into our beingness, but we get caught up in the doingness. And so sessions like these, opportunities like these are really there to remind us that we owe it to ourselves to get back to our essence rather than to be caught up in all the roles that we are playing all the time. Now, yesterday I went through what losing out looks like and feels like. And I just want to reiterate that when you're in the losing out quadrant, what you're experiencing is a low level of connection to yourself, a low level of connection to your essence. Your motivation is so low. You've got low internal motivation and you've got low external motivation. There are 2 kinds of motivations in life, and the one kind of motivation is away from motivation that tends to get us moving. That's very survivalistic motivation. And then you get towards motivation, which is when you're living an inspired life, when you're doing things that bring you true happiness and joy, that make you feel connected to yourself. When you're losing out, you're not really responding to any kind of motivation other than pure survival, in the moment survival. There's not even survival for the long term. It's really just survival in the here and now. Okay? I want you to maybe take a screenshot of these. These are actual notes around what it's like to be in this space. And one of the things that I want to reiterate for being in this space is really about this idea that true victim state, and there's a lot of blame that happens when you're in this kind of space. Okay? Blame is, I am powerless, the world, woe is me, this is happening to me. We get that. And this is a very, very difficult space to be in, because if you're not taking personal responsibility, moving on, you're waiting to be rescued. No one's coming to rescue you. And even when people come to rescue you, you're probably going to bungle it. And I think we all know stories of people who are rescued, but they are unable to really receive the rescuing that gets done for them. Hi, Hannah. I then talked about, yesterday I spoke about, hi, Gary. I spoke about the driven performer. The driven performer is the person of my heart. This is the person that I love so, so much. Because I identify with this person exceptionally in many different ways. I know we spoke quite a bit about the driven performer yesterday, but I've put some notes together, and this is a way in which you can see in a lot more detail what the driven performer is, how the driven performer is showing up. The driven performer is the by me consciousness. If it is to be, it is up to me. This person is obsessed with control. They are obsessed with rescuing situations and people. They want power over and they look to collaborate. And the reason why they're in this particular space is because they are deeply unsafe. And so, and I don't think I really drove that home yesterday, but they are deeply, deeply unsafe. And when you're deeply unsafe, you are constantly looking to the external environment that you are in to try and make yourself create some safety. But because you can't create internal safety, one of the things that you're constantly, constantly, constantly doing is that you are trying to soothe your nervous system. And so you soothe your nervous system with many different compulsions and many different addictions. And in many ways, you know they're not making sense to you. But the way in which we soothe ourselves is exactly what I've got on this screen at the moment, which is around this concept of people pleasing. And very often we all know that when we are people pleasing, we are doing something that is just not getting us in our towards motivation. But what it is doing is it's creating a mechanism for safety for ourselves. One of the things that is very, very real for the person who is in this driven performer space is that they have a powerful, powerful, powerful away from motivation. The thing that they fear the most is being seen to be less than, or dropping the ball, or being, as I said yesterday, deur mekaar en not agter mekaar. And this person is confident in a manner of speaking, but they are confident when they are coloring in the lines that they already know. They struggle to take risks. They struggle to move into the unknown. And why? Because the unknown is a space that they can't control, and they are driven by control. Gary and Hannah, if you have any questions, if you have anything that you want to just put into the conversation, please don't hesitate.
I'll put it on the chat.
Yeah, sure. I'm just doing a quick recap of our chat yesterday. I just think it's very important to realize that the person who's in the driven performer, this person is accomplished. But this person is struggling, and they're struggling to really own their success. They're really starting to own things because for them, the world is unsafe. And the reason why the world is unsafe, the reason why none of the things that they know, the income that they earn, the assets that they have, the relationships they have, the job descriptions that they have, none of these things make them feel safe because the unsafe situation is deep inside of them and not necessarily in the world. And we are always a reflection. We see the world as we are. And if we are unsafe with ourselves, the world is unsafe. I was thinking today that one of the things that happens with a person who is a driven performer is the driven performer likes to rescue other people, they like to rescue situations. And one of the things is that they feel is persecuted because when they rescue people and people don't comply, or when they are counting on people and people disappoint them, it is a catastrophic experience for them. And it becomes not about what that person did. It becomes, this is what the world is like. You see, this is what the world is like. Because the unsafety is so pervasive inside of them that that behavior of that one single person becomes the reality of life for them. I want to just add one other thing. I'm not going to explain too much here, but the driven performer is good at collaborating. They're not good at co-creating. And I'll talk about the distinction between collaboration and co-creation later on. But I thought it was important for us to know that here we are talking about gaming the system, gaming people, but not really going into integrated relationships with people. So we play alongside each other like toddlers, but we don't play with each other, right? So that's one of the big differences. One of the things I wanted to say is that when we are in this space, we self-soothe. We have compulsions. One of the compulsions are the behavioral compulsions, like the stuff that I've got listed up there, which is people-pleasing, perfectionism, inappropriate, unproductive procrastination. Imposter syndrome is one of the biggest compulsions. I want to do it, but I can't. I want to do it, but I don't have the right. So there's this dynamic that gets you busy, but not progressing. And that is a compulsive behavior, right? I understand that this behavior isn't helping me, but I'm compelled to pattern into that behavior. And I just can't stop myself, right? So the other way in which compulsions, see my breakdown is sticking out, one of the other ways in which the compulsions play out is we over-gym, we overeat, we overcompensate for everything, we over-help at parties and at events, we overshop, we over everything. Everything is just a lot. And so it is exhausting to be inside of us, and it is exhausting to be with us. So the other thing is also that is important about this person is their mind is everywhere but here and now, because they are so hypervigilant all the time, right? I want to talk a bit now about this person. This person is in such a beautiful but such a perilous place. This is the emerging dreamer. Now, the emerging dreamer started to realize, you know what, all of this is exhausting. This is so exhausting. There's got to be another way. And they are starting to seek connection at a very, very different level. You know what I don't have with me? I don't have a timer with me. Can somebody please give me an indication of 7 p.m. and 7:15, because otherwise I am going to end up not having sanity.
10 to 7 at present.
7 and 7:15, yeah. So this person is starting to say, you know what, this is all very exhausting. I want to connect into myself. They have that first inkling. And we might start to experience this at a very young age, where we get pulled back to the driven performer by our societal roles. We get pulled back by just the sheer busyness and all that kind of, stereotypical pressures. But there's an awakening somewhere inside that there has to be a different way. And I'm going to dance between the emerging person and the driven performer a bit so that the conversation makes a bit more sense. But what the emerging performer starts to say is, you know, my professional success is awesome, or being successful externally is awesome. But when I get home at the end of the day, I'm just tapped out. So I'm going to look for that other thing. Now, they might be lost in this journey for quite a while. And you'll see here, they go on what I call, and what Joseph Campbell calls, Gary, you probably know this, the hero's journey. Fawzia and Hannah, do you know the hero's journey? No? So it's by...
No, I'm not familiar. Sorry.
Okay. So Joseph Campbell, he is a literature buffer and a movie buffer. He's just an expert in the art of narrating stories. And he basically dissects all stories that make it in the world. And the stories that survive are the stories that go through a particular journey. And that's the journey that every single hero embarks on. There's the known ordinary world. And the ordinary world is okay for a while. And then suddenly, because we are human, we get pulled by something. We get awakened by something. We desire something. And desire is one of the cleanest but most complex states that we can be in. And so we have a desire and we're inspired by something, but that inspiration remains clean for a very short space of time. The I can feeling remains clean for a very, very short period of time. I can suddenly becomes polluted with, but what if? What about? Maybe it's not for me. And so there's a lot of things that happens, and the world then starts to nudge the hero, and the hero retreats and moves forward and retreats and moves forward and retreats and moves forward on the journey. And every time the hero retreats, something happens in the hero's life to pluck the hero upside the head and move them along the journey. So for instance, a typical journey might be, I'd love to start my own thing. When I register a company, but I don't do anything about it. And I just get back caught up into my normal job. Everything's okay, but then I go on a holiday and then I start dreaming about my own business again. But this time around, the dream is a bit louder and it's a bit noisier and it's more unsettling. And so I actually start to develop a product or something like that. And I start to put it out there. But then my job gets my attention again and I get caught up. And then that dance can start to happen. And then at some point, you get retrenched. And that's a huge awakening. And now you've got to make something happen. But the internal transformation that was needed to become self-employed or a business owner hasn't happened yet. And so there's that discovery and that discomfort, that dislocated feeling from self. And in my opinion, the word hero is the right word because this is the most courageous space to be in. When you are in the emerging space, this is the most courageous space to be in because, you know, when you made the transition from losing out and being a newbie to accomplishing your performance, it was a clean journey. There were steps, there were stages. The world had flags on the journey for you to follow. But this journey is a different journey. There's no flags. You are literally marching off of your own maps of reality. And when you march off your map, and there is no map, there is no compass, there is nothing, you've got to feel your way in the dark. And when you've been so accustomed to knowing what the steps and stages are, and when your nervous system is already riddled with anxiety and tension and trauma, to make your way into this zone is a truly, truly courageous space to be in. And I think one of the things people struggle with is that they just feel like they're struggling, but they don't recognize just how enormous this transition is that they are going through. And so there's a lot of stop-start when you're in the emerging space. So when you're in the emerging zone, this is the time when you start to say, the world is happening for me. Even the bad things, even the terrible things, they have come to me as my teachers. They have come to me as emissaries from beyond my understanding. We don't dismiss the things that is happening to us as happening in a victim mindset. And we don't say any longer that this is only happening because of my efforts. We start to really want to pause. We start to really want to know and understand. We start to really think, you know what, my efforts, my energy, my ability to create what I'm looking for is finite. I might have to surrender and allow assistance from beyond my own limited realm. Now, this is an important transition from when you are in the performer state, the driven state, to this space. When you're in the performer space, one of the things that you are saying is, I don't trust the world. The world is unsafe. I don't trust myself. I don't trust other people, and I don't trust institutions. And I might go to my religious institutions, but it's very performative. It's not necessarily a space of surrender. I perform the rituals, but I don't necessarily put my faith somewhere else. I put my faith in the evidence of I've done this before, and based on that evidence, these are the chances and the risks I can take going forward. So when we are in the performer space, the driven space, we are very much the logician. It's very much up here, right? As there are any questions, you must please ask. Any comments, you must please offer them. And so when we make our way into this space, we start to think maybe things don't happen sequentially. Maybe the evidence of yesterday is not an indicator of what I must do tomorrow. Maybe I must look beyond my own known reality, and I must look to the maps of others, and I must look to the maps that I don't yet know how to navigate. And so I say again, this is a space of courage. And very, very, very few people actually allow themselves the depth of surrender to make it through the space into the flourishing space. When you come to this space, this is the space of letting go of resistance. When you are in that driven space, your hallmark is resistance. You question everything. You argue about things. One of the things that is so important to you when you are in this space is that you are right. You know what they say, if you can't be happy, you must be right. And so you become argumentative about things that you don't really need to be argumentative about, right? And you are argumentative here, even with your own self, your own thoughts, your own ideas. You're argumentative because you lack surrender. Suppose you've got giggles on your face, but you've gone away. Okay. So because you are here in this emerging space, the only way that you have to do and make your way through this space is by learning. I have to become willing. I have to become willing to journey with the unknown. And one of the things that makes this space courageous is because you sit with your inner child. You go towards this person here and you say, my friend, you've got wounds. Your wounds are the trauma that is running your nervous system. Your wounds are the reason why you feel disconnected. Your wounds are the reason why you feel unable to enjoy your success. You know, I was thinking today about this driven performer situation, and I was thinking, I remembered this colleague of mine. It was about 10 years ago already, and he was going to an island holiday, and he was less than excited, and I was very confused by his lack of enthusiasm. And I said to him, but aren't you excited? You are leaving tomorrow for an island holiday. I think he was going to Mauritius or something like that. And he looked at me and he just said to me, it's like he looked at me, but he looked beyond me. And he kind of just said, yeah, but how many more island holidays can you go on? Like an island is an island. And so something so magnificent, in my opinion, was unable to stir enthusiasm and joy in him, because it was yet again that disconnection that was driving his experience of reality, not the reality itself. So again, that's because of the unsafety, or the lack of safety. One of the things that the person who is in this emerging space becomes very aware of is that the addiction to the self-judgment and the addiction to the own shame, because when we are in our perfectionistic inner critic space, that is one of our addictions. Our addictions is self-judgment and our addiction is shame. And I really want you to take note of this, because very often we are very proud of our perfectionism. We carry our inner critic like we're carrying a trophy around with us. Our inner critic is an addictive thinking pattern. It's one that is harsh and severe and that is judgmental on ourselves. And because our inner critic is judgmental towards ourselves, we end up being the inner critic towards others. Our inner critic becomes a critic of others as well. So I really just want to reiterate that when you make the intention to leave behind that disconnection with yourself, when you make the intention to move towards your safety and a safer space within yourself, one of the first things you must really hone in on is that voice of yours where you are offering yourself judgments and shame. Because judgment and shame does not help us to progress, and judgment and shame does not help us to sit with that inner child and to start to reparent and to, in fact, rebirth ourselves. Because when we are in this space, that is what we're doing. We are doing deep, deep shadow work, and we are doing the work of reparenting ourselves. We are doing the work of rebirthing ourselves. And that is hard work. Birth and parenting is messy. And this is the hero's journey, because you are constantly gathering yourself around the unknown in a very, very messy space. This is also a very painful space for many people. This is the space in which they lose relationships. This is the space in which anything and everything that made them feel okay about themselves becomes hostile. And they have to start looking for a new tribe. And one of the things that they start to discover is that the tribe that they have to begin with is the tribe of self. And so you'll find that the person that is on this space seeks solitude a lot. They start to go into a journey of self-discovery. They start to want to know, what is my purpose? What are my purposes? What mission am I here for? What makes me feel complete and whole? What do I have to purge out of my life? What do I have to take away out of my life? What do I have to get rid of that interferes with my ability to feel whole, to feel complete, to feel as if I am worthy? The person that is in this space is seeking alignment with self and truth, and they are starting to really, really make space for faith. And faith is anything that is outside of your control. I just want to pause here quickly. Are there any questions, any comments, any thoughts, anything that you want to share to and add into the conversation? So Gary's question is the South African society currently based on an overwhelming number of people trapped in a driven performer space? I think, I can just give you my opinion, Gary. And I don't think my opinion has any currency about South Africa. But I think that the South African society is very much a victim losing out society with a bit of the driven performer in there. And part of the reason why I say that is because we are not really a society with a lot of mercy, and we have a lot of blame in our society. So at an individualistic level, we might see ourselves as the driven performer level. When we go to work, we are the driven performer. So certainly when I work in corporates, I see the driven performer. But you know, we're always waiting for someone to rescue us. The government must do something. The government must build houses. The government must fix the roads. The government, and so certainly we have entitlement, but there's an activism that is needed in us to make the government do its job. But that activism isn't present. I can't hear you, Gary. You've got your on mute. I know you're speaking, but I can't hear what you're saying.
That's odd. If you hold your spacebar down, it's supposed to actually just allow you to chat as you go. I'm just saying yes on that point. It does require a lot of activism within the individual, which is why I'm making this comparison that I see in the majority. We have what I would call driven performer, whereas we need to aim towards this emerging dreamer, because I very much recognize in my own self emerging dreamer. I'm finding it very, very scary letting go. But you know, many things have been done for me. I lost my mother this year. I've just inherited a cat. Many sort of things are being done for me to have the faith that I can look after a cat again, for example. So yeah, I just see that this activism is very much lacking, and it has to be an individual. Yeah, we've got to let go of the government. We've got to let go of this idea of a centralized thing, centralized electricity, centralized this, centralized that. I was interested in your thoughts in the comparison. Sort of.
I don't want to digress too much, but if you look at the behavioral economics of the work of a guy by the name of C.K. Prahalad, when he talks about bottom of the pyramid activism, and the Grameen Bank, for instance, we're talking about people who were like, I mean, they created seismic transitions and transformations in the economic environments that they existed in. Individual people, by doing what was unconventional and by doing what other people in their respective industries would scoff at. So the Bank of Grameen, for instance, is the most profitable bank probably in Asia, but it is a zero interest bank. It banks, it lends to the unbankable. It's mind-blowing what it has accomplished, but it was the activism of a single human being that made it possible. And when he started the bank, he loaned microloans from his pocket to people on pavements in India. So that's just one of the examples. And that is the emerging dreamer, that dreamer who thinks of what can be different. And if we become to really make our way from the emerging dreamer towards the next level, which is the blissful flourisher, we have to become activists with ourselves. And activism is hard. Activism is difficult, it's messy, it's complex, and you have to be patient. And this is a long road. And as I said early on, just before you joined, none of us are in one of the quadrants at any moment in time. And I was saying that each and every single one of us, there are as many levels of consciousness as there are human beings on the earth, compounded by seconds in the day, because we go from level of consciousness to level of consciousness all the time. It's a very fluid process. So there's no one space that we are all in. I mean, I would imagine that we spend, because of our mindset, the majority of our time in a particular space. But if our journey can be to this space, this is transformative. This is not just transformative for us as individuals, this is transformative for peoples and for communities. Any other comments? My condolences to you, Gary. I'm very sorry to hear about your mom.
It, in the end, was actually the right thing. She was 83. The last year was very difficult. The majority of her life, her vision of her success was driven by activities she could do with her eyes, i.e. being a seamstress. She was exceptional at that. She lost her sight and she lost her hearing. So her world had truly disintegrated. And the end result was heart. She ended up with congestive cardiac failure. And it was about 2 weeks. So not very extended, but hard enough. It was right in the middle of COVID. Getting into hospital was a pain for me, etc. But yeah, thank you for the commiseration. I had obviously, I think, begun to prepare myself much further back than that. So that wasn't bad. I had in fact taken her from her own home. She had a single bedroom. She was looking after it herself very well. About 3 years ago, I brought her into my home. I have a 2-bedroom because she eventually wasn't looking after herself, taking her tablets, that sort of thing. So thank you. But yeah, it certainly is transitional time for me.
Yeah.
And interestingly, the substance of the world telling me I'm over my 60s now and I don't really have much more time where I could be earning materially, has me all a tither, you know, and I'm looking to find a new passion, find that something next, that way that I will be, the way that I will flourish. Okay. So yeah.
So I hope that this contributes significantly to your thinking, to your deliberations.
Very much. And I think the title of the whole thing, Passage to Bliss, is very apt. I do think that You're aligning it. You're going along that path very well. So yeah.
Okay, so let's see what what's gonna happen for you in your next phase. We're gonna get you to being a blissful flourisher. So, what is beautiful about the emerging space is that the emerging space is that process where your caterpillar self becomes the butterfly. Now we romanticize the butterfly, and obviously the blissful flourisher is the butterfly. But to become the butterfly, what the caterpillar must endure is a complete emulsification. When it is in the pupa, when it's a pupa in that cocoon, it is literally rendered to a liquid. And so it has to be transformed, not superficially, not iterative, small micro changes. It is a complete and utter destruction of one way of being so that another way of being can emerge. And when we talk about this kind of transformation, we're talking about when you're in this emerging phase, we're not making small changes. We're unlearning who we are to become a new version of who we are. And so we have to suffer small deaths. These are the deaths we die before we die. And in order to do that, your brain has to deal with what it sees as catastrophic. And I'm not exaggerating. The reason why so few people make their way to experiencing the blissful flourisher is because our primitive brains run the show. When our nervous systems are traumatized nervous systems, we live our lives on autopilot from the back of our brains. We do what we did yesterday, and we don't think about how what we did today is exactly what we did yesterday. I don't know if I shared this yesterday, but we have between 64 and 82,000 thoughts per day, depending on who the scientists are that you're following. But the one thing that they are all consistent on is that in excess of 80% of your thoughts in excess of 90% of your thoughts are repeat thoughts. You're doing the same thing that you did yesterday. It's habitual thinking, it's habitual feeling, it's habitual responding, everything is habitual. And the challenge that we have as human beings is that in excess of 80% of all those habitual thoughts are negative, fear-based, contracting thoughts. So we are living on autopilot. When last did you think consciously about brushing your teeth? You just brush your teeth. When last did you think consciously about calculating and estimating whether or not the seat you're sitting on can hold your body? These are all just happening in the background. So our brains are majestically powerful. But if we don't lead our brains lead us. And so we've got to make the deliberate intention every single day, if not every single minute, if not every single hour. We've got to make the intention of being intentional with how we're going to spend the time that is ahead of us. The most powerful thing that you can do in your life is to set intention. And that is why, for me, this time of the year is so exciting, because people go into this reflective, intention, goal-setting space. The challenge is just, are we able to maintain that level of engagement with ourselves and to maintain ourselves in that state of intention? Thank you, Fauzia. So let's go to the blissful flourisher and go and find out what this bugger is up to every single day. The blissful flourisher understands what being aligned means. The blissful flourisher, I want to also just say one thing about the emerging person. The emerging person says, I'm not on autopilot anymore. When things happen, they happen for me. And my superpower is to make meaning on terms that work for me. My superpower is to make meaning on terms that serve the agenda that I have for my life. The emerging The superpower is not yet the emerging person is not yet integrated with that superpower, but starts to become conscious of that ability. When we come to being the blissful flourisher, we start to say, you know what? I exist in a state that is as me. The world is not separate from me. The world and I, we are united. When I see the world as an angry place, then that's a reflection of my rage. When I see the world as a blissful space, that's a reflection of my bliss. When I see the world, I see myself. The world is the mirror with which I engage myself. My favorite greeting in the whole wide world is the greeting Sawubona. So Sawubona says, I see you. And underneath I see you is that sense of I am because you are, and you are because I am. And so there's this umbilical cord between you and I that we cannot separate ourselves. This is when we start talking about social justice. This is when we start talking about, and not just talking about in emerging space, we talk about and we ideate about social justice. And I don't mean social justice for the whole world. You might just be doing it for yourself and the next person that you're in a relationship with. We don't need to save the world. We only need to save our own households. That is all we actually need to do, right? So when we are in this space and we are in this sense of as me, we have an attachment and an umbilical cord, and everything we do has got an impact on everything around us. And so we are mindful and we are cautious and we are careful, and we make sure that we are in an aligned state to the things that we want to see in the world. So in the driven performer state, we might want to see certain things in the world, but we make it happen, and we will use people to make it happen. We are attached to our agenda, and that is why we collaborate. When we are in the blissful flourisher, we co-create. We surrender our agenda and we say, what is the bigger agenda? What do I plug into? It is not about me. When we collaborate, we let go of parts of us, and there's this win-win conversation, but in the win-win, there's also the lose-lose. We can still see what is ours, and the other person can still see what is theirs. And so we know what we collaborated, we understand what we lost, so that we could gain. When we are in the co-creation space, we can no longer see what part of the idea was ours. We can no longer lay claim to the idea that was the next person's. It is co-owned, it is co-created, it is messy, and it is mushed in. It's like an omelette that was made. The egg is now done. It can't go back to its original state. We can't separate the parts out any longer. When the person is in a blissful flourisher state and difficult things happen, they bear difficult things with grace, with mercy towards themselves. When we are in our blissful flourisher space, one of the biggest energies that we have is the energy of mercy. We bring ease to the people we connect with. So when we are in this space, this is freedom. This is bliss. And if we get to be in this space every now and then, that is power. I don't know that we necessarily live in this space, but when our perspective is driven out of the space, we can temper that dark part of our humanity. And here we don't dominate our emotions. We make space for our emotions. When we are in the driven performer space and that difficult emotion arises, what we do is we dominate the emotion. I just want to share very quickly something with you about emotion. Emotion is a bit like a tunnel, or we are the tunnel, and the emotion wants to travel through the tunnel. It might travel through certain emotions are big emotions, and they are bulky, and they are heavy, and they're not agile, and they will travel through the tunnel slowly, and so they'll spend time with us. Other emotions are wispy emotions, and they'll travel through the tunnel fast. But what we do is, when emotion comes up, we put a barrier up because we say it's going to be uncomfortable. And we don't want to experience that discomfort. And so we block the emotion from traveling through us. And then what that emotion has to do is it has to work harder to go through and harder to go through and harder to go through. And that emotion becomes more and more and more difficult until eventually it capsizes us and we experience deep, deep traumatic events that wipe us out completely. Or our vulnerability just gets us, or we resist our vulnerability so much that we become hard and inflexible people. But when we are in this blissful, flourishing space, we become adept at allowing the emotion to come. We become adept at committing ourselves to feeling emotions that we would otherwise taboo. When we are in the driven performer space, we very often spend a lot of time tabooing our emotions. And one of the ways in which we taboo our emotions is we would, for instance, say, I don't do that. And when somebody else does it, we judge them harshly. We judge them severely. We make it so wrong, and we make it part of our manual for life, and we make ourselves wrong, and we make other people wrong. And that's not the job that emotions come to teach us. Emotions come to teach us and ask us, what must you surrender? What must you make welcome? What must you make easy? That is what emotions come to do. Emotions are there to teach us where we are trying to hold on to control, where control is an illusion that we don't actually have. And so when we're in this blissful, flourishing space, we welcome the emotion because we understand that when the emotion comes, we are going to be better as a result of it. One of the things that we grapple with in the driven performer space, and we start to make welcome in the emerging space, is this idea that we can't control happiness and sorrow. So when we are in these energies, when we're in this energy, this blissful, flourishing energy, we start to understand, well, that understanding starts in the emerging space, where we really understand it at an integrated level at this space, is that when you want more joy in your life, you need to make yourself available for more pain. Because our ability to carry depth of emotion is along an entire continuum, not just on the happy side. So one of the things that we think is that as we're going to grow through life and become more successful, is that we manage to evade the bad stuff. When in fact, when we look at people who are incredibly successful, and I don't mean just at the material level, I'm talking about people who live life in deep grace with themselves, very often they carry heavier traumas than most of us can even begin to fathom for ourselves. And they also experience joy at a higher level. And why? Because the capacity, the ability, their competence, their fitness to carry emotion is at a higher level. And so they experience higher degrees of bliss. And that is why very often you will see people who are in this blissful state, when they see sadness and sorrow, they are moved by it because they have permission. They allow themselves that vulnerability. They allow themselves to really, really be with the hurt and the pain that is around them. But it doesn't define them. One of the things that I love about people who are in this space is that they are either at the eye of the storm, horrible things can be happening around them, but they remain centered to who they are. They don't allow the things that happen around them to take them into their darkness. The other thing that they do is, this is the true activist, is they become the storm itself. And the thing that I love, love, love about the person who is in this space is that they can let go of resistance, even in the process of them resisting prevailing dogma around them. So what that means is that they don't fight with other people. They literally just go on and they say, you know what? I can't persuade you of a different way of being, but I can demonstrate my way of being by doing it at the best possible level that I can do it. And they go ahead and they do it. So I'm reminded of a story by Mahatma Gandhi. And Mahatma Gandhi is one of the people who, in many ways in his life, he did reflect the blissful flourisher. but he also very much lived honestly as the emerging seeker. And there's a story that is told about him where a mother with a child came to him and said, you know, this child eats a diet of sweets and I can't get this child to stop eating sweets. And Mahatma Gandhi contemplated the moment and he said, come back in 2 weeks. And then the mother left and came back in 2 weeks. And when they came back in 2 weeks, Mahatma Gandhi said to the child, you need to stop eating sweets. Sugar isn't good for you. This is what it does to your liver. This is what it does to your kidneys. And we had a conversation. And the mother looks at Mahatma with curiosity and she says, so why couldn't you tell that to us 2 weeks ago? And he says, because 2 weeks ago, I was attached to a diet of sugar and sweets. And so who am I to say to this young man not to eat sweets, not to have a diet of sugar? So here, really and truly, this is a place where you're experiencing bliss, not because the world has become easy peasy, not because there are unicorns in your life, not because you are living on a diet of fairy dust. You've experienced this state from within you, and you are emanating, you're exuding your own God spark. And because you're exuding your God spark, you end up being the kind of person that people gravitate towards, and they become attached to your mission. And I'm going to talk again about that guy, Yunus Muhammad, who is the founder of the Grameen Bank. You know, he never asked people for money. They started to lend together with him because they believed in him and the mission that he was on. You talk about the Wright brothers and aeroplanes. They launched an aeroplane into the air with volunteers. And so you're really starting to see how amongst us, there are giants. And those giants have this magnetic power where people buy into their missions, where people sign on for their missions, where people say, whatever it is that you're doing, I want to be part of it, I want to support you, and I want to co-create legacy with you. Okay. So this is the 4 levels of consciousness. And I wanted to share the 4 levels of consciousness with you before going into branding and how you overcome burnout, because I'm quite sure that you can see from this how you create burnout. Burnout is a mental self-oppression. There's an exhaustion that you experience because of internal habits and external habits. Yes, you can be working very hard, but hard work in and of itself is not the cause of burnout. You are going to be doing more work than you're able to do because you don't have boundaries. And your boundaries is a function of people pleasing. So that mindset is the one that creates the overwork. The mindset is the one that takes you from a state of being fueled by your work rather than being depleted by your work. These things are all very interrelated. If you don't understand the mindsets, you can't unravel these things. You can't unravel the concept of burnout, but you also can't create a personal brand that makes you burnout free. So when you start creating a personal brand, when you start showing up to the world, when you start showing up to opportunities in your life, you've got to start having conversations with yourself and asking yourself, which mindset am I engaging with? Am I engaging as the victim? Am I engaging as the overcompensating driven performer who is always on the lookout for how people are going to do me in? Am I operating as the emerging seeker? Or am I able to drop into my own version of the blissful flourisher? What activities in your life is it that gets you into all these different states of consciousness? And how can you start doing less of the stuff that gets you into those lower levels of consciousness? And what can you introduce into your life that makes it possible for you to live in the higher levels of consciousness. One of the things that is so important for you to register is that when you are in those higher levels of consciousness, your well-being improves, your longevity of your life improves, your ability to withstand shocks and traumas improve, right? And so if you really want to live a courageous, a wonderful life, you've got to start making it possible for your nervous system to engage with things that is off your map, off your known map, so that you can go into the unknown world. So you can endure that idea of dying before you die. So you can allow yourself to surrender to the unknown. I think I just want to conclude by saying that, or rather I want to ask the question, do you have a sense now of why we are misspeaking when we are telling ourselves or telling other people that they need to get out of their comfort zone, as opposed to advocating for people to get into their comfort zone? Do you get why that is important?
I think for me, there still are some questions, not 100% certain that I understand why comfort zone. You were speaking that the emotions go through a tunnel, and some are thick and heavy and bulky, and some are wispy and light and travel lightly. In your comfort zone, I would get, in my mind, your comfort zone is when most emotions flow, not stop, flow. Whether they're bulky, whether they're wispy, whatever they are, they flow. Why is it that having to get into the comfort zone makes this blissful state? How do you persuade somebody that that's the effort, that's the way forward?
Simply because, Gary, so few people have ever met their comfort zone. We are living our lives from our survival zones. We are living our lives from hugely reacting nervous systems. When emotions can flow and our nervous system doesn't kick up a fight, then we're in our comfort zone. Then we're in nirvana. Then we can grow easily. Then we can say, oh, this isn't my ego, because when we are in our survival zone, our ego, our id, says anything that makes me look silly is a problem. So I'm going to stop it. When we are in our comfort zone, we say, oh, if I fail, I learn. We laugh at ourselves. Oh, that was a cool experience. Oh, now I know how not to do it. When we're in our survival zone, it's hard. We are stuck. We can't take action because our compulsions, our addictive thinking takes us into our perfectionism. Our inner critic is running the show. Our success is just a fluke, and so it's imposter syndrome that kicks into play. We are not comfortable with what we've accomplished. We are stuck and holding on for dear life. Because if we lose what we've got, who are we? We are nothing. Because we have no worth. We are hustling for our worth in our survival zone. When we're in our comfort zone, we're not hustling for our worth. And so anything, the world is a playground. We must remember that the human being's brain needs certainty. So growth beyond a certain point is not advisable. We don't advocate it. And so when we're in our comfort zone, we can endure stretch. When we're in our survival zone, we can't endure that stretch. The rubber snaps, the elastic snaps. It's very brittle. It's very, very fragile. Everything is about what are they going to say? What is going to happen? So it is just so important that we get our language right, because one of the things that is so important, and Gary, you and I did NLP together, is the fact that our bodies follow our language, right? Our bodies follow our language. And so we are telling people you've got to get out of your comfort zone. We are telling the very people who need to become skilled and crafted at their comfort zone to get out of a place that they've never ever been in. I just want to show you one last thing. I have, for my own self, codified self-love. These are the elements, these are the behaviors, I see myself a bit as a mechanic, the how-to. And for me, this concept of self-love has just been too nebulous, and I'm not interested in bubble bath and that kind of thing. I'm talking about the hard work, the real work, the messy work of that emerging into blissful. And this is the conclusion that I've come to over 2 or 3 years of research. My own journey is that these are the steps you have to take to make your way into self-love. This is that blissful state. This is that place where if the world comes to attack you, you've got your own back. You know you're good with yourself. You've got the willingness to endure the pain. You can see the willingness to endure the pain because you know on the other side of that pain, there is a higher level of bliss. You are willing to endure the poverty because you are not going to be held ransom by the wealth that keeps you trapped and alien to yourself. You are willing to do the really hard stuff. You are willing to have those tough conversations because you know on the other side of that conversation is either freedom with yourself or freedom with the other person. So self-love is hard because there's this willingness element inside of it. This is the courage I spoke about. Self-love is hard because compassion is not easy. Compassion for ourselves challenges us. Our primitive brain says, but if I criticize you, it's going to make you do better next time. Whereas the research is telling us nobody does better next time when they are judged harshly. We can see that in our children. I certainly see that in my children. I was incredibly severe, specifically with my daughter. And so she has a deep inner critic locked into her. Why? Because my inner critic was aggressive and I activated her inner critic. And so I see her, what she needed was compassion when she was having a difficult time. Instead, I gave her criticism. Acceptance is a critical part of self-love and bliss. And sometimes it's hard to accept ourselves. When we have a manual and we have a rule book that says this is taboo, and we've done what is taboo, then our self-acceptance becomes hugely challenging. Coherence is that thing about becoming aligned. What are our values? What is our purpose? What is our standards? Who do we associate with? Who do we not associate with? What do we do? What do we not do? What do we spend our time on? What do we not spend our time on? Our sovereignty, our personal power. So that distinction between, oh, I've got my automated thinking, as opposed to, I run my brain. I control what I think. I control what I feel. I control how I show up in life. I control how I contribute in life. That is sovereignty. And the sovereignty that you have against your own automated behavior is the most challenging sovereignty, our own stories. We can very often say, I'm doing it because he said so. No, you're not doing it because he said so. You're doing it because you are too afraid to own your authority in relation to him. You own your right to say, I will not. But you don't want to have that difficult conversation, so he made me do it. Reverence is that ability to really own our own God spark. That ability to say thank you and to receive. That ability to step into our gifts. That ability to say, you know what? This not good enough thing is not a part of my narrative any longer. I surrender it. Now, we are very good at owning our bad stuff, but we are not good at owning our shine. And once you've owned your shine, your luminosity goes out into the world. And just by showing up, you demonstrate love, you demonstrate yourself to the world in a different way. And so I brought us to this point. This is the last slide in the presentation for today. But when we are living in that final level of consciousness, that place of practicing self-love, we are transformed, we are transforming, and we are transformative for other people. So we've got like literally 3 minutes left. Are there any thoughts, any comments before I close off? Gary, you're speaking, but we're not hearing you.
Sorry about that. Yes, you wouldn't be hearing me. I just wanted to state that I think where I came unstuck with some of this when I said to you, how does one tell another that getting into the comfort zone was the correct thing to do, is the fact that in the majority of cases of individuals that I'm aware of, they feel their comfort zone is when success, control, rigidity, ability to deflect is there. So that's to them what they call comfort zone. So I needed the ability to hear you say, define it rather as, what was it?
Survival zone.
Survival zone rather than comfort zone. And that's made a huge difference to a whole bunch of what you have said. I really do love that last slide. That is an amazing
That's my
pictorial.
label.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so guys, thank you very much. Ladies, you've been incredibly quiet. You've been very still. I hope you are with us. But I just want to remind you that these are being recorded. You will have a recording of it. So Gary, if you're wanting to have conversations with people, you are welcome to connect with me directly. You are always on LinkedIn with me. And then, of course, the recording is here. If there are any questions, please shoot them my way. Tomorrow we move into, what is Fozer saying? Took so much in today. Okay. I'm going to send these actual slides to everyone. I didn't send the previous slides, but I think these slides have got all the content that I want, that I've shared. Maybe you don't have the time to go through the video and you just shoot through the slides. And I really want you to take this message into the world out there and tell people that there are different ways in which they can experience reality. And if they can tap into that inner power, the outer world will actually end up bending and shaping itself to what they want. And this is actually actual reality. When you start saying, I no longer opt into these things, those very things that stress you out become part of your past. It's not a part of your present. So you end up not fighting about things, you end up not resisting things, you just change the way in which you act things in your life. Okay? So I'm going to bid you adieu. I hope you have a beautiful evening. Thank you so much for your time, for your attention, and for spending this time with me. You allow me to do my labor of love, so I'm very grateful for that. And so if you haven't had supper yet, enjoy it, and enjoy whatever you can do this evening. Bye. Bye, Hannah.